After my heart operation, I typed into our family's group message, "Who can come get me from the hospital?" My son, Leo, shot back a reply, "Just get a rideshare. I'm in the middle of a game." My husband, Robert, chimed in, "Why don't you stay in the hospital for another few weeks? The peace and quiet around here has been wonderful." But that evening, after they spotted me on the television news, their 67 frantic calls went straight to my voicemail. What I chose to do next altered the course of everything. The pain erupted like a bolt of lightning, feeling as though it was tearing my chest apart. I drew a sharp breath, my eyes snapped open to a blinding white light that made my head throb violently. Where on earth was I? The room seemed to tilt and spin in nauseating circles. I took in the scene around me. Stark white walls, monitors beeping in a steady rhythm, and tubes extending from my arms like an entanglement of plastic ivy. I made an effort to push myself into a sitting position, but my body responded with a searing wave of protests. Something was deeply wrong, horribly wrong. My chest felt as if it had been pried open with a wrecking bar. Beneath the flimsy hospital gown, I could feel the dense layers of bandages swathed around my torso. "Mrs. Anderson, it's good to see you're awake." A man in a white lab coat materialized at my bedside. He had compassionate eyes that peered from behind thin-framed spectacles. "I'm Dr. Evans, your cardiologist. Can you tell me how you're feeling?" Like I was run over by a freight train, my voice emerged as a strained, hoarse whisper. A burning sensation scraped my throat. "What happened to me?" He glanced at a monitor next to my bed. The flashing numbers were meaningless to me, but his demeanor was a mask of calm professionalism. "You had emergency cardiac surgery 2 days ago, a quadruple bypass. Your heart actually stopped for a total of 47 seconds while you're on the table." 47 seconds. The phrase bounced around in my mind like a pebble falling into a bottomless well. Was I dead? From a technical standpoint, yes, but we were able to bring you back. He gently placed his fingers on my wrist, his eyes focused as he took my pulse. "You are going to be just fine, Mrs. Anderson. The procedure was a complete success. We'll keep you here for 2 weeks to recover, and then you can slowly get back to your regular life." 2 weeks. My gaze drifted around the sterile, impersonal room once more. Through a small window, I could see the gray silhouette of the Chicago skyline against overcast January skies. There were no flowers arranged on the nightstand, no get-well cards, not an indication at all that a single soul was aware I was even here. A nurse hurried into the room, his attention fixed on the IV bag connected to my left arm. He offered a comforting smile, and his touch was gentle as he fine-tuned the drip rate. "Mrs. Anderson, my name is Daniel. I'll be your nurse for this shift. Are you in any pain at the moment?" I managed a small nod, not trusting myself to speak. He jotted something down on his chart before adjusting the dosage in my IV. Within a few short minutes, the sharp, biting edges of the pain began to recede into a dull throb. Dr. Evans pulled a chair closer to my bed. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm going to ask a few simple questions just to assess your cognitive function." He paused. "Can you tell me the current year?" 2025. Very good. And the month? January. The name of the month felt foreign and heavy on my tongue. Excellent. Now, could you squeeze my hands as tightly as you can? He held out both of his hands to me. My grip felt as feeble as a newborn's, but he gave an encouraging nod. "Your motor skills seem to be in good shape. Your memory appears to be fully intact." He rose and began typing notes into a tablet. "The next couple of days will be focused on managing your pain and starting some very light movement. We'll have you up and walking for short periods before you know it." After he departed, I was left in the company of the machines and their relentless rhythmic beeping. I cautiously reached for the bedside table where my personal effects had been placed. My fingers located my phone. The screen was cluttered with dozens of notifications, breaking news alerts, promotional emails, prescription reminders. I scrolled past them, searching for something more meaningful. Messages from my family, missed calls from Robert or Leo. There was nothing. I opened our family's group chat. The most recent message was from 3 weeks prior, a complaint from Robert about the price of gasoline. Before that, Leo was asking if I could lend him money for a new gaming console. Not a single word about my surgery, not one inquiry about my well-being. With a trembling hand, I placed the phone back on the table and fixed my gaze on the perforated ceiling tiles above me. I had been dead for 47 seconds, and it seemed that no one in my world had even noticed I was gone. Not one text message, not a single phone call. I shut my eyes, allowing that profound quiet of the hospital room to envelop me. The distinct antiseptic scent of the hospital stirred something deep within me, memories I had been diligently pushing away for years. It began back in the summer of 2020. I was in the backyard of our Naperville home, tending to my rose bushes in the sweltering heat. The tightness in my chest felt like an iron band being cinched around my ribs. I clung to the garden fence until the sensation subsided, convincing myself it was merely the intense Illinois humidity. "Eleanor, you're always so dramatic," Robert had called out from the patio, a glass of lemonade in his hand. "Come inside before you give yourself heat stroke." I had brushed it off with a laugh. At 66 years old, I told myself I was as healthy as a horse. I just needed to drink more water and get more rest. But the episodes persisted and grew more frequent. By 2021, the simple act of walking up the stairs to our bedroom felt like a monumental climb. I would have to stop on the landing, my hand clutching the banister as my heart pounded against my ribs as if trying to break free. Robert would typically be propped up in bed, engrossed in his political talk shows. "You're just getting older, Eleanor," he would comment, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Perhaps you should scale back on all that gardening." I never confided in him about the strange, metallic taste that would flood my mouth during the most severe episodes, or the way the room would spin if I stood up too fast. He had his own concerns with his golf league and his investment club meetings. Leo was of even less support. When I mentioned to him that I felt perpetually exhausted, he just shrugged from his usual spot on the living room sofa. "You should probably see a doctor, Mom." "Actually, no, wait. That'll be expensive. Maybe just try taking some vitamins." At 28 years old, he was still living in our guest room, yet his primary concern was how my potential medical expenses might diminish his future inheritance. The first significant attack occurred in our kitchen on a Tuesday morning in March of 2023. I was brewing tea when the pain struck, a blow to my chest as forceful as a sledgehammer. I reached for the counter to steady myself, tea leaves scattering across the linoleum as I sank to the cool floor. "Robert," I managed to call out, but my voice was so weak it barely reached the hallway. He discovered me 10 minutes later, still on the floor, my breathing shallow and ragged. "Eleanor, for heaven's sake, did you slip?" He helped me into a chair, but his focus was already elsewhere. "I have a tea time in less than an hour. Are you all right to drive yourself to a walking clinic?" I drove myself to the emergency room. The young physician who attended to me had kind, serious eyes and a reassuring touch. "Mrs. Anderson, you've experienced a minor heart attack. We need to conduct further tests." The test confirmed what I had subconsciously feared but refused to acknowledge. The years of chest pain were not just signs of aging or stress. My arteries were narrowing like ancient corroded pipes. "Without this surgery, you likely have 6 months, perhaps less," Dr. Martinez had informed me back in November. But a quadruple bypass could grant you another 10 good years. I had driven home in my old sedan, my hands trembling on the wheel. 10 good years. The real question was whether I wanted to spend those years with people who seemed oblivious, even when I was on the verge of dying. The sound of my hospital room door creaking open pulled me back to the present. Nurse Daniel peeked his head in, that same warm smile on his face. "How are you doing, Mrs. Anderson? Do you need anything for the pain?" I glanced at my phone, which remained devoid of any messages from my family. "No, thank you. I was just thinking." He gave a nod of understanding. Major surgery gives you a lot of time to think. Sometimes that's a blessing, and sometimes that's a curse. After he left, I stared at the family group chat icon on my phone screen. My finger hovered above it, hesitating. 2 weeks had passed since the operation, 2 weeks of deafening silence. But perhaps they were uninformed. Maybe the hospital had failed to contact them properly. Maybe there was a sliver of hope that 45 years of marriage and raising a child still held some meaning. Maybe. The morning of January 29th dawned, crisp and luminous through my hospital window. It was the day of my release. I gathered my meager possessions, packing them into an old duffel bag Robert had gifted me years ago for a weekend trip we never took. Every item was folded with care, my reading glasses, the paperback that I had barely managed to read, and the pajamas that carried the faint scent of home. My chest felt noticeably stronger. The stitches tugged with my movements, but the oppressive, crushing pain had subsided into a dull, tolerable ache. Dr. Evans had signed my discharge forms with an encouraging smile, instructing me to take things very easy for the next month. "You are incredibly lucky to be alive, Mrs. Anderson," he had remarked during his final examination. "Make every moment of this second chance count." I checked my phone for what must have been the 20th time that morning. Still no messages from Robert or Leo. 2 weeks of absolute silence while I had clawed my way back from the brink of death. Perhaps they assumed I was still too unwell for visitors. Maybe they were orchestrating some kind of surprise party to welcome me home. I had always been the one to manage our family's medical crises, driving Robert to the hospital for his hernia surgery, rushing Leo to the emergency room when he fractured his wrist skateboarding. They were probably just uncertain how to behave now that I was the one who was unwell. I began to type a message in our family group chat. "Hi everyone, I'm being discharged today and feeling so much better. I can't wait to see you both." I deleted it. It felt too long, too pleading. They would perceive me as being needy. I started again. "The hospital is letting me go today. Looking forward to being home." Deleted. Still not quite right. A third attempt. "The doctor has cleared me to come home today. Would love to see you both." My finger hesitated over the send button. This one felt appropriate. It was hopeful without sounding desperate. I pressed send and placed the phone on the bed next to my packed duffel bag. The reply came with startling speed. Leo's name popped up first. "Just get a rideshare. I'm in the middle of a game." I read the message 3 times, trying to ensure I wasn't misinterpreting it. 47 seconds of being clinically dead. 2 weeks recovering in the hospital, and my son couldn't be troubled to hit pause on his video game? But Robert would be different. Robert would surely understand. We had been married for 45 years. He would want to be the one to bring me home. His message appeared just below Leo's. "Why don't you stay another month? It's been so peaceful without you." The phone slipped from my grasp, landing softly on the white hospital quilt. The words seemed to burn on the screen, a glaring neon sign that announced the complete collapse of everything I had ever believed about my family. "Stay another month? It's so peaceful without you." I sank heavily on the edge of the bed, my duffel bag sliding to the floor with a muted thud. The brilliant morning sunlight that streamed through the window now felt like a cruel joke. My chest ached, but this pain had nothing to do with the surgery. This agony originated from a much deeper place, a place that Dr. Evans' scalpel could never hope to mend. Nurse Daniel appeared in the doorway, a clipboard in his hand. He took one look at my expression and quickly stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. "Mrs. Anderson, you've gone quite pale. Are you experiencing any chest pain?" I shook my head, unable to trust my voice. He picked up my phone from the bed and his eyes scanned the screen. His look of professional concern softened into something more akin to pity. "I am so sorry. Families can be difficult." Difficult. That was certainly one word for it. Another was that I had dedicated 45 years of my life to people who viewed me as little more than a source of income and a household manager. People who found my absence to be more agreeable than my presence. I looked down at the discharge papers that were laid out on the hospital bed. They contained instructions for my medications, a schedule of follow-up appointments, warnings to avoid strenuous activity, a detailed guide for my new life. But as I sat there in that sterile room, rereading Robert's words on my phone, those documents started to resemble something entirely different. They weren't just medical directives, they felt like a declaration of independence. The papers in my hands were no longer just discharge instructions. They were proof of 45 years spent playing the fool. I exited the main doors of the hospital on legs that felt unsteady, each step a stark reminder that I nearly perished and no one who should have cared did. The rideshare driver was a kind-faced woman with a warm smile. "Tough day at the hospital, dear?" "Tough 45 years. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could catch them. She met my eyes in the rearview mirror as we merged into the Chicago traffic. "Surgery?" I simply nodded, leaning back into the worn fabric of the seat. The discharge papers rustled in my lap. Suddenly, I was transported back to another time when I held important papers in my trembling hands. It was 1982. Leo was just an infant, and at 25, my ambitions were far grander than our tiny apartment. I had saved for 2 years to put a down payment on a small storefront, a place where I could open the bakery I had always dreamed of. But babies needed bassinets, not business loans. "The bakery will have to wait," Robert had said, bouncing Leo on his knee. "We need that money for baby supplies." I remembered carefully packing away my business plan and recipes, telling myself it was only a temporary postponement, just until Leo was a little older. The car passed a quaint little bake shop, its display window filled with artfully decorated cakes. My chest tightened with an ache that had nothing to do with surgical scars. "Family can be a handful sometimes," the driver commented, skillfully navigating an intersection. "Believe me, I know." Another memory pushed its way to the surface. 1995. Robert and I were finally planning a long overdue honeymoon. 15 years late, but at last it seemed possible. A trip to Italy in the spring. I had been saving for months, taking on extra tutoring sessions after my teaching day was done. Then Leo was accepted into a prestigious private high school. "Italy will still be there later," Robert had said, his voice gentle as he took the travel brochures from my hands. "Leo's education has to be our priority." 4 years of tuition. The dreams of Rome and Florence were tucked away in a box along with all my other deferred joys. We were driving through the heart of downtown now, the towering glass skyscrapers mirroring the bleak January sky. I recalled making the same drive in 2003, utterly exhausted from working my full-time teaching job and then tutoring late into the evening, while Robert was at home watching his nightly news programs. "When do I ever get a break?" I had asked him once, slumping into my armchair after a 14-hour day. "When Leo finishes college and lands a good job," he had assured me, "then it will be our time." Leo did graduate. Then he needed assistance with his rent. Then a down payment for a car. then seed money for a tech startup that failed in less than a year. The memory of co-signing that business loan was the most painful. 2010. I had signed the documents that used our house as collateral while Leo animatedly sketched out his grand vision on the back of a napkin. "This is it, Mom. In 6 months, I'll pay you back every penny with interest." The business survived for 4 months. I worked for 3 additional years to pay off the debt. The car turned onto the familiar streets of our suburb. We passed the elementary school where I had spent countless hours volunteering for bake sales and class trips. We passed the park where Robert and I used to walk in the early days of our marriage, back when he looked at me as if I was the center of his universe, not just the manager of his household. "Do you have family meeting you at home?" the driver asked as we approached my street. I thought of the text messages seared into my memory. "Just get a ride share. Why don't you stay another month?" "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I believe I am done with that." The house came into view. Cream-colored siding, dark green shutters, the sprawling garden I had meticulously tended every spring and summer for 20 years. It was supposed to feel like coming home. Instead, it looked like a monument to my own foolishness. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, gazing at 45 years of mortgage payments, repairs, and endless chores. All of it so Robert could have his comfortable evenings and Leo could have his state-of-the-art electronics. The car pulled away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a house that suddenly felt like the scene of a crime, the crime of my own self-abandonment. I walked up the path to the front door, the keys feeling heavy in my hand. The house seemed altered now, not like a home, but like evidence. The key turned in the lock with the soft click, and I stepped into the dim interior. Even the foyer felt alien, as if I had walked into a stranger's life. I flicked on the light and surveyed what my family had done with their newfound freedom. A mountain of mail was piled on the entryway table. Unopened bills and junk mail were strewn about. Robert's golf shoes were left in the middle of the floor next to a pair of Leo's dirty sneakers. It was clear no one had made any effort to tidy up in weeks. The living room was even more distressing. Leo's gaming station had sprawled across the space, resembling a teenager's disaster zone. A collection of energy drink cans were stacked on the coffee table I had so carefully chosen. Pizza boxes were piled high next to my favorite armchair, the one I had bought with my own savings years ago. It appeared they had been hosting gatherings. I moved deliberately through the evidence of their contentment. My absence hadn't prompted sorrow or worry. It had been a cause for celebration. The kitchen confirmed this narrative. Dishes overflowed from the sink, and takeout containers were crammed into the trash can. The refrigerator was stocked with expensive craft beer and gourmet ice cream, luxuries they had indulged in while I was in a hospital bed fighting for my life. But it was my small art studio that delivered the final, most painful blow. They had converted it into a storage room. Boxes filled with Robert's old sporting equipment were stacked on my easel. Leo's outdated computer parts were piled on my bookshelves. A thick layer of dust covered the framed photos of my own artwork that I had hung with such pride. 47 seconds. I had been dead for 47 seconds, and they had commandeered my personal sanctuary to serve as a glorified closet. I sat down heavily in the only chair not buried under their clutter. The combination to the small safe in the closet was etched in my memory. Leo's birthday. The irony was not lost on me. The safe door swung open with a quiet whoosh. Inside, my last will and testament rested in its navy blue folder, exactly where I had placed it months before. I retrieved it with a steady hand and read the clauses I had so thoughtfully composed. To my beloved husband, Robert Anderson, I bequeath the house and all personal effects. To my son, Leo Anderson, I bequeath all financial assets, including my retirement accounts. beloved husband. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound echoing in the desecrated room. The man who had suggested I remain in the hospital for another month because his life was more peaceful without me. My son, the man-child who couldn't interrupt his video game to drive his mother home from the hospital after she'd nearly died. I walked over to the dusty bookshelves. There were photos from our wedding, a young couple beaming with optimism. Pictures of Leo as a baby with his innocent grin and chubby hands reaching toward the camera. Vacation snapshots from trips I had paid for, but had been too stressed about the expense to truly enjoy. In every single photograph, I was smiling. The provider, the nurturer, the fool. I picked up my phone and searched for estate planning attorneys Chicago. The screen populated with a list of law firms. These were professionals who understood that a person's will could be amended, that an inheritance was a gift to be earned, not an inalienable right. Vance & Associates was at the top of the search results, noted for their expertise in estate law and charitable endowments. It was perfect. I looked around my studio one last time, at the boxes piled on my work table, the dust coating my personal treasures, the glaring evidence of my family's profound disrespect. Then my eyes fell to the will resting in my lap. First thing tomorrow, I would call Ms. Vance. Tomorrow, I would begin to rectify the most significant mistake of my life. Tonight, I would meticulously plan how to give my family precisely what they had earned. Absolutely nothing. The elevator ascended smoothly, each illuminated number marking my ascent toward justice. 15 stories above the bustling streets of downtown Chicago, Amelia Vance was waiting with the legal authority to reshape my family's destiny. A week had passed since the devastating homecoming. I had spent 7 days conducting research, formulating a plan, and compiling all the necessary paperwork. I had discovered the Women's Heart Health Alliance online, a charitable organization dedicated to assisting families navigating cardiac crises, people who truly understood the preciousness of life. The elevator doors parted to reveal a corridor adorned with rich mahogany paneling and brass fixtures. Vance & Associates was elegantly inscribed in gold leaf on a set of frosted glass doors. "Mrs. Anderson," the receptionist greeted me with a warm, professional smile. "Ms. Vance will see you now." Amelia Vance's office offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline through immense floor-to-ceiling windows. The walls were lined with law books and distinguished degrees from universities I could only have dreamed of attending. She was younger than I had envisioned, perhaps in her mid-50s, with stylishly cut gray hair and sharp, perceptive eyes. "Please, have a seat." She indicated a plush leather chair positioned across from her expansive desk. "I understand you wish to make some significant revisions to your estate, Kren." I settled into the chair, the folder of documents resting on my lap. "I want to leave my entire estate to charity. I want to leave my family nothing." Her eyebrows arched slightly. "That is a very substantial alteration. May I ask what has brought about this decision?" I told her everything. The surgery, the 47 seconds of clinical death, the 2 weeks of complete abandonment in the hospital and returning home to discover they had been reveling in my absence. Ms. Vance listened intently, her pen moving silently across a yellow legal pad.
"Anderson, I must ask, are you making this choice out of anger? Sometimes following a major health scare, people can be—" "I've had a full week to contemplate this," I interrupted. I opened my folder and laid out the printed text messages, bank statements, and medical reports. "This is not anger. This is clarity." She examined the documents with a meticulous eye. "You are remarkably thorough. The Women's Heart Health Alliance is a superb organization. They provide temporary housing for the families of cardiac patients, they fund crucial research, and they support recovery initiatives. They help people who value the gift of life," I added, "unlike my family. We can structure this as a charitable remainder trust. This would allow you to retain the use of your home for the remainder of your lifetime and receive a modest monthly income. Upon your passing, all assets would then transfer to the alliance." That sounds perfect. I could live my remaining years in comfort, all while knowing that my family would inherit exactly what their actions had merited. And what of your husband and son? Perhaps even a small token? No. The word escaped me with more force than I had intended. They are grown men. It is well past time they learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Miss Vance observed me for a long, quiet moment. Very well. It will take approximately an hour to draft the new documents. Are you absolutely certain this is the path you wish to take? I pictured Leo's text message. Just get a rideshare. I heard Robert's words. It's been so peaceful without you. I have never been more certain of anything in my entire life. The next hour was a whirlwind of legal terminology and document preparation. Miss Vance's assistant brought in 2 witnesses, paralegals, who knew nothing of me or my story, just another client rewriting her will. This document hereby revokes all previous wills and codicils, Miss Vance explained, placing the freshly printed pages in front of me. Upon your death, your home and all financial assets will be transferred to the Women's Heart Health Alliance. You will retain lifetime residency rights and a small monthly stipend. I read every single word, twice. There was no mention of Robert, no provision for Leo. There was only clean, unambiguous legal language that would shatter my family's comfortable assumptions and replace them with a starkly different reality. The signing itself was surprisingly straightforward. 3 signatures, 2 witnesses, 1 official notary seal. 45 years of providing for an ungrateful family erased with a few strokes of black ink on crisp white paper. I will reach out to the Alliance this afternoon, Ms. Vance said, handing me a set of certified copies. They will likely want to arrange a meeting with you to discuss the possibility of a media announcement. A media announcement? I like the sound of that. Public acknowledgement for a worthy cause. Public humiliation for my family. The Alliance's main office is actually in this building, on the 12th floor. Their media director, Marcus Cole, is exceptional at managing these types of stories. I stood up to depart, the certified copies securely placed in my handbag. At the door, Miss Vance shook my hand, her grip firm and respectful. You are giving an incredibly generous gift, Mrs. Anderson. The Alliance helps hundreds of families each year. Families who are deserving of help, unlike my own. As I walked back towards the elevator, the hallway seemed distinctly brighter. Behind me, Miss Vance's office contained the mechanisms of justice. Ahead of me, the Alliance's office held the power to transform my private resolution into a public statement. It was time to turn personal justice into a powerful public message. 3 floors down, the offices of the Alliance were a hive of morning activity. The elevator doors opened into a welcoming reception area, its walls adorned with heart health awareness posters and framed stories from appreciative families. Mrs. Anderson? A man emerged from a corner office. He was the picture of professional efficiency with a warm, engaging smile. I'm Marcus Cole, the media director. Thank you so much for choosing our foundation. His office walls were decorated with awards and newspaper articles detailing successful fundraising efforts. It was clear that this man knew the impact of a compelling narrative. Please have a seat. He gestured towards a comfortable chair opposite his desk. Your attorney mentioned that you are open to making your donation public. Could you tell me about your circumstances? I recounted everything, the surgery, the 47 seconds, the cruel abandonment at the hospital, the heartless text messages. Marcus listened with focused intensity, jotting down notes on a pad. This is a very powerful story. Your experience could potentially save lives.
It's crucial for people to realize how essential family support is during a health crisis. If my personal pain can prevent someone else from going through the same thing, then it will all be worth it. He picked up his phone and made a call. Channel 8, this is Marcus Cole from the Heart Alliance. I've got a story for you. A local woman is donating her entire estate after her family left her to fend for herself during major heart surgery. The call lasted about 10 minutes. Marcus's eyes shone with enthusiasm as he spoke. They can send a camera crew to your house this afternoon. The timing is perfect. Heart Health Awareness Week kicks off on Monday. The rest of the morning was spent in preparation. Marcus coached me on the key points to emphasize: the critical nature of family support, the mission of the Alliance, and the realities of cardiac recovery. But above all, he encouraged me to be brutally honest about my family's neglect. Don't sugarcoat it, he advised. Authentic emotion is what connects with people. Your story will touch hearts and inspire change. By noon, we were at Channel 8's studio downtown. The news producer, a sharp, intuitive woman named Jennifer, immediately grasped the significance of the story. A woman gives her house away after her family texts her to stay in the hospital longer? Jennifer shook her head in disbelief. This is going to strike a chord with our audience. The on-camera interview was less nerve-wracking than I'd expected. The bright studio lights, the professional cameras, the questions I had rehearsed with Marcus. The interviewer, Sarah Jenkins, possessed the perfect combination of empathy and journalistic integrity. Mrs. Anderson, what was going through your mind when you read those text messages from your family? I realized that love must be a two-way street. For 45 years, I chose to put my family's needs before my own. When I needed them the most, they chose themselves. Gratitude is a choice, and so is neglect. Why have you chosen to donate specifically to heart disease research? The doctors saved my life when my heart stopped beating for 47 seconds. My own family didn't seem to care if I lived or died. After the studio segment, the news crew accompanied me back to my home in Naperville. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains as the Channel 8 van pulled into my driveway. The professional cameras captured images of the house that would soon belong to the Alliance. Inside, Sarah asked more personal questions as the camera rolled. We sat in my living room, the very room where Leo had expanded his gaming kingdom during my hospitalization. This is where you recovered after returning from the hospital? This is where I discovered that they had been living very comfortably without me, hosting gatherings, ordering expensive food, and using my personal art studio as a storage locker. The camera panned slowly across the family photos on the mantelpiece. Wedding pictures, Leo's graduation, vacation memories, all financed by my hard work, all silent witnesses to my misplaced devotion. Do you have any regrets about making this decision? I looked straight into the camera lens. My only regret is that it took me 68 years to finally recognize my own self-worth. The crew wrapped up filming in the late afternoon. Sarah shook my hand with what felt like genuine admiration. This story will air on the 6 o'clock news tonight. I have a feeling it will be picked up by other news outlets as well. I spent the evening at a quiet restaurant in the city, my phone buzzing periodically with messages from Marcus about the social media strategy. The Alliance's digital team was poised to amplify the story's reach. At precisely 6 p.m., I saw myself on the restaurant's television. The news anchor introduced the segment with practiced dramatic flair. A Chicago area woman is making headlines tonight after an extraordinary act of philanthropy. But it's the heartbreaking reason behind her generosity that has everyone talking. My face filled the screen, composed, dignified, speaking the unvarnished truth about familial betrayal and medical neglect. The segment included footage of my house, my explanation of the donation, and Marcus's commentary on the importance of supporting cardiac patients. The restaurant was quiet, but I noticed other patrons glancing from the television screen to me. Some offered sympathetic smiles, others appeared visibly outraged on my behalf. My phone remained silent all through the dinner. Marcus had recommended that I let the story circulate organically before I waded into the social media comments. By morning, he had predicted the story would be everywhere. As I drove home, I couldn't help but wonder if my family had seen the broadcast. They always watched the local news, usually to complain about the political commentary. Tonight, they would have seen their own callousness exposed to thousands of strangers. Tonight, they would have realized that their comfortable existence was about to come to an end. The garage door slid open, revealing the same house I had left that morning. But everything was different now. By tomorrow, Robert and Leo would finally understand that their 45-year free ride had come to a screeching halt. I switched off the television and went to bed, experiencing a peaceful, uninterrupted sleep for the first time since my surgery. The evening news was merely ambient sound in the Anderson living room. Robert was flipping through a golf magazine while Leo juggled his attention between a video game and the television screen. The debris of their comfortable life without me, leftover pizza boxes and empty beer bottles, littered the coffee table. "Another dull Tuesday," Leo grumbled, furiously clicking his controller. "Nothing exciting ever happens around here." Robert glanced up from his magazine. "Well, at least we don't have to listen to your mother fretting about every single penny we spend. Remember how she used to scrutinize every credit card bill?" They shared a laugh, blissfully unaware that their entire world was on the brink of collapse. The news anchor's voice shifted, taking on a more serious tone. "A Chicago area woman is making headlines tonight after an extraordinary act of philanthropy, but it's the heartbreaking reason behind her generosity that has everyone talking." Leo's game controller clattered to the floor. The house featured on the television screen was an exact replica of their own. The same cream-colored siding, the same dark green shutters, the same majestic oak tree in the front yard. "Dad," Leo whispered, his voice strained, "that's our house." Robert's magazine slid from his lap. They stared at the screen, a sense of dread mounting as the camera swept across their property. This had to be some kind of mistake. It couldn't possibly be real. And then Eleanor's face appeared on the screen. "Oh my God," Robert breathed. "That's your mother." They listened in a state of stunned disbelief as Eleanor calmly recounted her story to the interviewer. The heart surgery, being clinically dead for 47 seconds, the utter abandonment she experienced in the hospital. "When I messaged my family to ask for a ride home from the hospital, my son told me to get a rideshare because he was in the middle of a game. My husband suggested I stay another month because it was so peaceful without me." Leo's face turned ashen. Those were his words, verbatim. Robert covered his mouth with his hand, the cruelty of his own message now broadcast for the entire Chicago metropolitan area to hear. "This is impossible," Robert yelled at the television. "She can't do this to us. That's our house." The news segment proceeded, with Eleanor detailing her decision to donate her entire estate to the Women's Heart Health Alliance. There was no mention of any inheritance for her family, no provision for Robert or Leo. "Call her," Robert grabbed Leo's arm, his grip tight. "Call her this instant." Leo fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial the number. It went directly to voicemail. "Mom, it's Leo. We just saw the news. What are you thinking? Call us back right now." Robert snatched the phone from him and tried calling himself. Again, voicemail. "Eleanor, this is your husband. You call me back this minute. This is absolute madness." They called again and again over the next hour. After the 10th try, Eleanor's phone stopped ringing altogether, sending them straight to voicemail. In the meantime, the story had gone viral on social media. Leo's social media feeds were inundated with shares of the news report. Friends, neighbors, and even distant relatives were commenting, recognizing the house, and expressing their shock and disgust at the family's conduct. "Look at this," Leo said, showing his father the screen. "Everyone is calling us monsters. They're saying we had this coming." Robert was breaking down now, his face contorted in a way he had never seen. "Where will we live? We have no savings. Everything is in her name." The stark reality of their situation was finally dawning on them. The house, the bank accounts, the retirement funds, it all belonged to Eleanor. They had lived in such comfort for so long that they had forgotten the crucial detail that they owned nothing. By 10 p.m., they had left 67 voicemails and sent dozens of increasingly frantic text messages. Eleanor did not respond to a single one. "She's lost her mind," Leo said, pacing anxiously around the living room. "The surgery must have affected her brain. She has no idea what she's doing." "Or, maybe," Robert whispered, staring at the phone in his hand, "she knows exactly what she's doing. Maybe this is her revenge."
They spent the remainder of the night attempting to grasp the sheer scale of their predicament. No income, no assets, no property. Leo had never held down a steady job, and Robert had been retired for years. "What are we going to do?" Leo asked his father around midnight. "How can we possibly fix this?" Robert looked around the living room at Leo's expensive electronics and his own collection of pricey golf clubs, at the comfortable life they had built entirely upon Eleanor's sacrifices. "We wait for her to come home," he said, his voice grim, "and then we make her understand that family is family, no matter what." They took up positions in the living room, where they had a clear view of the driveway. Robert brewed a pot of coffee to stay awake. Leo kept his phone plugged in so he could continue to call. Neither of them slept. They sat by the window, watching for the sweep of headlights, mentally rehearsing the arguments they hoped would salvage their comfortable lives. But deep down, they both sensed that something had irrevocably shifted. The woman they had taken for granted for 45 years had finally decided she was done being taken. They had been waiting since sunrise, practicing the words they hoped would undo the damage. Robert was stationed by the front window, a coffee cup rattling in his trembling hands. Leo paced restlessly behind him, his phone clutched like a lifeline he didn't know how to use. The sound of my key turning in the lock caused them both to freeze. This was it. Their opportunity to avert the catastrophe they had brought upon themselves. I walked through the door at 8:30 a.m., feeling unhurried and composed. I found them positioned in the foyer, blocking my path to the kitchen, their faces a mixture of desperation and resolve. "Mom," Leo stepped forward, his tone aggressive, "what is all this insanity? We are your family." I slowly removed my coat, carefully hanging it on its designated hook. "Family?" My voice was even, almost conversational. "When I was lying in a hospital bed, fighting to stay alive, did either of you bother to call me even one time?" "We were busy." Robert's voice was sharp with the manufactured indignation. "Do you have any idea how difficult it is to manage this household without you? So difficult, in fact, that you suggested I stay in the hospital for another month." My tone remained placid, but my gaze was glacial, because it was so peaceful without me. Leo's carefully prepared arguments seemed to dissolve under my calm scrutiny. "That was just a joke, Mom. We didn't mean it." 67 phone calls last night, I observed, walking past them towards the kitchen. "It's remarkable how you suddenly find the time to call when your inheritance is on the line." They trailed after me like frantic children, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of panic. "Mom, please be reasonable." "Eleanor, you're not thinking straight. The surgery has clearly impaired your judgment." "We love you. We've always loved you." I filled the coffee maker with deliberate, methodical movements, completely ignoring their escalating pleas. When Robert reached out and grabbed my arm, I looked down at his hand with such profound indifference that he instantly recoiled. "You have 24 hours to vacate this house," I said quietly. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Robert staggered back, Leo's face drained of all color. "Where are we supposed to go?" Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "We don't have any money." That is no longer my concern. My complete emotional detachment was far more unnerving than any display of rage would have been. This was not the woman who had spent 45 years prioritizing their every need. This was a stranger. "You can't do this!" Leo's voice escalated to a shout. "I'm your son. This is my home." "Your home? When was the last time you made a mortgage payment or paid a utility bill? When have you ever contributed anything to this household besides a mess and endless requests for money?" Leo opened his mouth to retort, but no words came out. The truth was undeniable. Robert tried a different tactic, summoning tears.
Eleanor, honey, I know we've made some terrible mistakes, but 45 years of marriage has to be worth something. It was worth something, I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. It was worth everything, until you both showed me precisely how little I actually meant to you. We can change. Robert's desperation was palpable. We'll be different now. We'll show you how much we appreciate you. For how long? I asked. Until the next time you need something from me? Until I'm too old or too sick to be of any use to you? I shook my head. I am 68 years old.
I don't have the time to wait for you to grow into decent human beings. I walked over to the kitchen table and sat down with my coffee, opening the morning paper as if they weren't even in the room. The Alliance will be taking possession of the property next month, I stated, without looking up from the page. You have until then to make other living arrangements. Leo slammed his hand down on the table. This is our house too. Check the deed, I responded calmly. Check the bank statements. Check any legal document you like. Everything is in my name because I was the one who earned it while you both lived off of my labor. The morning light streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the scene of their complete and utter powerlessness. For 45 years, they had operated under the assumption that I would always be there, always providing, always forgiving. They had been catastrophically wrong. Robert sank into a chair, the full weight of their predicament finally crashing down on him. Leo stood frozen, watching his comfortable life vanish with every word his mother spoke. When I get back from my walk, I said, standing and reaching for my jacket, I expect to see packing boxes. I glanced at my watch. It was 9 a.m. sharp. I walked towards the door. Mom, wait, Leo started. 23 hours and 58 minutes, I said, not turning back. The door clicked shut behind me, leaving Robert and Leo alone with the shattered remains of their comfortable lives. Outside, I strolled down the street I had called home for 2 decades, feeling lighter with each step I took. Behind me, through the kitchen window, I could see them still sitting at the table in stunned silence. Justice, I discovered, felt surprisingly peaceful. The packing boxes were already stacked near the front door when I returned. They had understood that I was serious. Through the living room window, I could see Robert hastily wrapping dishes in newspaper while Leo made multiple trips to his car loaded down with his gaming equipment. I made myself comfortable in the rocking chair on the front porch with my coffee, positioning myself to have an unobstructed view of their frantic efforts. The morning was cool and bright. Perfect weather for a new chapter. Mom, this is your last chance to come to your senses, Leo called out as he grappled with the large computer monitor. We can still fix this. You had 45 years of chances, I replied, my eyes not leaving the article I was reading in the newspaper. Robert appeared in the doorway, his hair a mess and his eyes puffy and red. Eleanor, honey, I am so sorry about that text message. I wasn't thinking. That is precisely the issue, Robert. You never think about anyone but yourself. The packing was a chaotic affair. 45 years of accumulated belongings, and they had less than a day to sift through it all. Robert kept darting back into the house for one more essential item, while Leo agonized over whether his collection of old video games was worth sacrificing trunk space for. Around noon, Mr. Peterson from next door ambled over, his curiosity piqued by the commotion. "Everything okay over here, Eleanor?" he asked, his eyes taking in the stacks of boxes and the frantic activity. "Just a few family adjustments," I said with a pleasant smile. "Nothing to be concerned about." He gave a polite nod, but the inquisitive glances he cast in their direction suggested he had already seen the news report. By now, the entire neighborhood was likely aware of what was unfolding. Leo made a series of increasingly desperate appeals as the afternoon wore on. He started with anger. "This is completely irrational. You won't be able to manage on your own."
Then he moved to bargaining. What if we paid you rent? What if we started contributing to the household bills? And finally, he resorted to pleading, Mom, where are we supposed to go? Dad hasn't worked in years. I've managed to live for 68 years. I'm confident I'll be just fine. Robert employed every manipulative trick in his extensive repertoire. Tears, feigned health scares, appeals to our wedding vows, and sentimental reminders of happier times. None of it had any effect on me. I had witnessed this performance countless times over the decades. By 4 p.m., both of their cars were packed to overflowing. Clothes and other possessions were crammed into every available nook and cranny. They were forced to leave behind furniture, kitchen appliances, and numerous boxes of things that simply would not fit. We will be back, Leo declared as he shoved one last box into his trunk. You can't just cut us out of your life forever. You are welcome to visit, provided you call first and ask for my permission. Robert stood beside his car, keys in hand, staring at the house that had been his home for 20 years. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt a pang of pity for him. Almost.
I never imagined it would end like this, he whispered. Neither did I conceded. I always thought that one day you would learn to appreciate what you had. At precisely 6 p.m., exactly 24 hours after I had issued my ultimatum, both cars backed out of the driveway. Robert was visibly upset, and Leo was seething with anger, but they were gone. I remained on the porch until dusk, watching the sun dip below the horizon of my quiet suburban street. For the first time in 45 years, I was utterly and completely alone. The silence was magnificent. Inside, the house felt vast. My footsteps echoed in the empty rooms. There was no television blaring, no arguments over finances, no constant demands for my time or attention. I went to my art studio and opened the desk drawer where for 20 years I had kept a collection of travel brochures. The mountains of Colorado, the deserts of Arizona, the national parks I had yearned to see but never had the time for. Time. Now, time was all I had. The travel brochures had been hidden away for 2 decades. Now, at last, I could look at them without a trace of guilt. February passed in quiet contemplation as I acclimated to my newfound solitude and began planning my first real adventure since before I was married. March saw my inaugural trip to Big Bend National Park in Texas. I had never gone camping by myself, never driven anywhere just for the sake of the journey. The stark beauty of the desert landscape was overwhelming. The endless expanse of sky, the ancient rock formations, a profound silence that stretched for miles. One evening, while sitting by a campfire, I met Clara, a retired history professor from Wisconsin. "First time camping out here?" she inquired, gesturing to my brand new gear. "First time camping anywhere, really," I admitted. "I'm 68 years old and this is the first vacation I've ever taken just for myself." Clara let out a warm, hearty laugh. "Well, my dear, it is never too late to start living for you." April took me to Colorado. I had upgraded my camping equipment and now felt more confident navigating the winding mountain roads. The high altitude was a challenge for my recovering heart, but gentle hikes through fragrant pine forests filled me with a vitality I hadn't experienced in years. I rediscovered my passion for photography that month, purchasing my first real camera in decades. The majestic mountains seemed to demand that their beauty be captured. Snow-dusted peaks reflected in the mirror-like surface of alpine lakes, wildflowers blooming in high-altitude meadows, and the rising sun painting the granite cliffs in shades of gold. May brought a new friendship. Ben, a widower from Boulder, taught me some advanced photography skills during a seniors hiking group excursion. We would spend hours discussing light and composition while trekking along forest trails at an elevation my cardiologist would have strictly forbidden just 6 months prior. "You're glowing, Eleanor,"
Dr. Evans remarked during my regular checkup. Your recovery has been nothing short of remarkable. What's your secret? Everything, I told him. I'm finally living for myself. My volunteer work with the Alliance intensified throughout the spring. Marcus featured my travel photographs in their monthly newsletters, demonstrating to other heart patients that life after surgery could be an exhilarating adventure, not just a matter of survival. Your story has already had a significant impact, Marcus told me over coffee in June. It's inspired dozens of families to have difficult but necessary conversations and to value one another while they still have the chance. But my favorite part was speaking with new heart patients, men and women who were facing surgery, feeling terrified and alone. I would share my story with them, not just the medical aspects, but the emotional journey of rediscovering one's own worth. Family support is important, I will tell them, but self-respect is paramount. Summer ushered in longer journeys. The Arizona desert surprised me with its vibrant and unexpected colors. Utah's dramatic red rock landscapes challenged my photographic abilities. New Mexico's ancient ruins provided a profound connection to history that spanned centuries. At 68, I was healthier than I had been at 58. Regular hiking, fresh air, a stress-free existence, and days filled with purpose had transformed not just my spirit, but my body as well. Clara and Ben became my regular travel companions. We would arrange to meet at different national parks, share campsites, and explore the trails together. For the first time in my adult life, I had friends who were bound to me by shared passions rather than familial duty. You seem like a completely different person, Clara observed one evening as we watched the sunset from our campsite in Zion National Park. What were you like before all this? Tired, I said simply.
Very, very tired. The social media accounts managed by Marcus's team chronicled my adventures. There were photos of an older woman discovering pure joy in the natural world. Stories of families healing through open and honest communication. It became a source of inspiration for other seniors to finally pursue their long-deferred dreams. Comments flooded in from all over the country. Heart patients shared their own stories of family struggles. Adult children saw their own behavior reflected in Leo's. Spouses recognized their own patterns of taking a partner's devotion for granted. July concluded with my return to Naperville, not out of necessity, but by choice. The house now felt warm and welcoming, my sanctuary, no longer my prison. I was in my favorite downtown coffee shop reviewing photos from my Colorado trip when a shadow fell over my table. I looked up and saw a familiar figure standing hesitantly nearby. Leo was there, looking different. Neater, more mature. His typical attire of jeans and a t-shirt had been replaced with business casual clothing. His posture was no longer slouched, but suggested someone who had grown accustomed to shouldering responsibility. "Mom?" His voice was tentative. "Do you mind if I sit down for a minute?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me, intrigued by this apparent transformation. 6 months had passed since I had asked him to leave, and in that time, my son looked as though he had aged 5 years, in the best possible way. "You look great," he said, taking a seat. "Tanned, healthy?" "Travel seems to suit me," I replied. I closed my photo album, but kept it on the table. "How have you been, Leo?" "Different." He paused, carefully selecting his words. "I got a job. It's a full-time position at a marketing agency downtown. I design brochures and websites." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I also rented a small apartment. It's not much, but it's all mine. I pay my own rent, buy my own groceries, do my own laundry." "That's wonderful, Leo." He took out his phone and showed me some pictures.
a small, tidy studio apartment. The furniture was sparse, but everything was neat and in its place. "How is your father managing?" I asked. "He's learning to be self-sufficient. He got a part-time job at a hardware store. He has his own apartment too." He looked down at his hands. "We don't really see each other much. We're both too busy working." I took a sip of my coffee, studying this new version of my son. The sense of entitlement that had always clung to him was gone, replaced with something that looked like genuine humility. "Mom, I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness. I'm not asking to move back in, or for money, or for you to change your will." This caught me by surprise. "Then what are you asking for?" "A chance," he said. "A chance to show you that I've changed. Maybe we could get coffee like this again sometime, if that's something you'd be open to." I showed him a few photos from my Colorado trip. His astonishment seemed sincere as I described hiking at high altitudes, camping beneath a canopy of stars, and learning photography from new friends. "I never knew you were interested in any of this," he said quietly. "I never gave myself the chance to find out." Leo nodded, a look of understanding on his face. "I've been thinking about that a lot, about how much of your life you gave up for us, and how we just took it all for granted." The work I do with the Alliance keeps me busy too, helping other families avoid making the same mistakes we did. "So we're a cautionary tale now?" he asked with a wry smile. "We're a learning opportunity," I corrected gently. We talked for another hour. Leo told me about his job, the deadlines, the challenging clients, and the deep satisfaction of earning his own way. He showed a genuine interest in my travels, asking about the places I had been and where I was planning to go next. "I understand if you don't want to have a relationship with me," he said as we got ready to leave. "I know that trust needs to be earned back over time, but I just wanted you to know that I get it now. What we did to you, how incredibly wrong it was." I walked with him to the parking lot. He was driving an older, practical sedan, but it was clean and well kept, more evidence of his newfound responsibility. "Leo," I said as he reached for his car door, "maybe we could do this again in a month or so." His smile was cautious, but his eyes were filled with hope. "I'd really like that. But let's be clear, I'm not changing my will. I'm not looking to go back to the way things were. But maybe we can build something new, something healthier." "I understand. And, Mom, I'm really glad that you're happy. Finally." I watched him drive away, noticing how he diligently checked his mirrors and used his turn signal. They were small things, but they spoke of a person who had learned the importance of paying attention. The afternoon sun was warm on my back as I walked to my own car. Tomorrow, I was leaving for a trip to Arkansas to explore the Ozark Mountains. Next month, I was thinking of heading to Maine to photograph the autumn colors. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Clara. "Ben found a fantastic campsite in Utah for October. Interested?" I typed back a quick reply. "Absolutely. Send me the details." 6 months ago, I had been a dying woman, dismissed and ignored by her family. Today, I was vibrant, healthy, and surrounded by people who chose to be a part of my life, not people who felt obligated. The difference, I had come to realize, was everything. I drove home through the familiar streets of Naperville, past the coffee shop where Leo and I had just shared our first honest conversation, past Mr. Peterson's house, where he waved to me from his garden, past the local office of the Heart Alliance, where Marcus was likely planning next month's awareness campaign. I drove home to a house that was now, finally, truly my own. Home to a life that I had built for myself, one deliberate, careful choice at a time. Some stories conclude with grand gestures and dramatic reconciliations. This story ends with something far more precious.
The quiet, profound satisfaction of a woman who had learned to value herself as much as she had once valued others. And perhaps, just perhaps, the possibility that love could flourish in the healthier soil of respect, rather than the barren grounds of obligation. The sun was setting as I pulled into my driveway, painting the sky in the very same brilliant hues I had photographed in the mountains of Colorado. It was beautiful, it was peaceful, and it was entirely mine.